Hey Simonics, what's up? Welcome to a new tutorial, and today we are developing our own Capacitor plugin for both iOS and Android. I raged kind of a bit earlier this morning because the process is a bit tricky, the documentation is at some point not 100% correct, but we will dive together into this, and at the end we will be able to create our own plugin using native Android, using native iOS code. So let's start this. There's actually a generate command on the Capacitor CLI that you can execute that will generate the basic structure for a plugin. Now, I just want to quickly show you the dialog. I actually already did this, so you already see this in the background. I picked as a name contact plugin because I wanted to retrieve all the user contacts, which currently takes with Cordova quite long. I got a lot of questions about this, so perhaps somebody is interested in using this code and publishing it. I really don't want to maintain that repository, so I just want to show you how to do it. So you would pick a name, let's use comdev contacts. You would use a name, contact, plugin, for example, a description, a Git repository, author, license, and then you can go ahead with yes, and it will create your folder. Now, this is the folder that you will get. Let's take a look at what we got. We got an iOS folder, we got an Android folder, and we got a source folder. Within the source folder is actually the definition that we need to make our plugin work, and especially we can also do the web implementation in here. So let's get started. We can see here is a simple first example for an echo function, and we will add another function to call get contacts. I'll also add a little variable here to filter them. We will actually not use them because I was too lazy in the end, but you can do this quite easily. So this is the interface. In the index we see we're exporting everything, and within the WebTS we see the actual implementation. Now we already see our first echo right here, so we can simply create our get contacts in here as well. I will bring in at some points a bit of code. You can find the full article or tutorial linked below the video as well if I'm too fast in some points, but I don't want to make this video too long, so therefore here we go. Now for the web, it's kind of hard to access a device contacts, so therefore I will just return some dummy data to show you that you can also build a web implementation. And because we see those lines in the end here, the plugin is actually registered and we can simply use it within our Ionic application with actually not too much work. So whenever you make changes to your plugin, you simply run npm run build. And then we can get started because we've basically already finished the web implementation, and that should be quite fast. Now, I also started an Ionic application to use or to test actually our package. So what I did so far is I created a blank new project type Angular using Capacitor. And now the documentation for the plugin recommends to use npm link, which I kind of like, but that didn't really work out for me. So instead of doing this, what I actually did is I simply called npm install directly and used the path to my plugin. So my plugin, hopefully, hello? Yes. My plugin is just one folder above the current Ionic application. And when you run it like this locally, it will add an entry to your package.json. Now, if you work as a team on this, you either all need to have it like this, so one folder above your current application, or you can also just publish it. That will work as well. So now we got the entry, we got the contacts plugin, which is loading from my local folder, and we can even see it when we navigate to the node modules. Contacts plugin, there we see it. It's kind of linked now as well. And we see all the same code in here, which comes in really helpful once we work on the native applications. Now for the web, let's quickly go through our web implementation because that's kind of easy. For the web, all we need to do is we need to import the plugins from Capacitor core, and we can use the structuring to get the contacts plugin from the plugins object. Now for the web, this isn't enough because there's also a little note in the links that you need to directly import this plugin as well by its name. So that's the name we used in the package JSON of the contacts plugin. There we go. So that is the real name of the plugin. You need to import it to call this register, or in the background the register will be called, so then it will be available for your application. And now already created a little empty array, and we can go ahead by using our contacts plugin. So let's say this contacts equals await contacts plugin get contacts, and now you could pass whatever filter. So you could perhaps filter for some contacts within that plugin. Now this isn't finished because there's also results. Once again, if you check out the signature right here, we return a promise, which is an object, results, and an array of objects. So within the results, we will have the actual objects. Of course, you could change this, but I just went with this so far. So let's add a little console log, and then we can already run Ionic serve in the background. That's all we need. Now, as a little, let's say, preview, we also need to, we need to add our native platforms. We haven't done this so far. So let's open a second tab and run Ionic build. You always have to run at least once Ionic build before you can actually add the iOS and Android platforms, but that should be quite fast. Now, in terms of the development workflow, of course, you could now simply work within your contacts plugin, but I found this kind of hard because then you have to save, you have to rebuild, and it takes quite a lot of time. I will show you how I did it to create this tutorial. So this is first of all our web implementation, and we see we get back from our plugin this little dummy data. Pretty cool. We can see that our plugin already works. So I need to make sure I'm in the right project. So we finished the Ionic build. Let's add iOS. And while we add iOS, we should also see found one capacitor plugin for iOS, which is our contacts plugin. And now we can do the same for Android, and within the dialog or the output from the command line, we should now also see the one plugin found for Android. And there we go. There we go. There's our plugin. So where we want to start, let's say we start with npx open iOS, because iOS is actually a bit faster. Npx cap open iOS should open our native project. So since we have a button to directly trigger our plugin, we can also do the work for the plugin actually in here. And that's what I wanted to show you, because that's actually a lot faster. You just write it in here. It is anyway linked to native stuff. So if I add whatever in here, I hit save and I check out the actual implementation of my contacts plugin, I would see that within plugin Swift, the changes were applied as well. So I really recommend to, first of all, work on your capacitor plugins within the native environment, so Xcode or Android Studio, and also work on them in the integrated project, because for me that definitely worked a lot faster and a lot better. Now let's copy this function, and this was called, I think, get contacts. So we have the call, which is a cap plugin call, from which we can actually access our filter value quite easily. You could pass all information that you need to your native plugins and simply access it in here. Now, I don't want to write with you together the objective or the Swift code, although we could have a session on that. but I will bring it in because that actually took a bit of time to figure it out. So what I did is I Googled actually for Swift or iOS get contacts, and after a bit of trial and error, I found how it works. Now we see a lot of red lines. That's simply because we also need to import contacts up here. And once we hit save, we should see, yes, everything's gone away. So I don't want to go through all of this. It basically requests access. Then if granted, it will enumerate all the contacts. And in here, I actually created my little own logic to extract the first name, the last name, and the telephone number. So making sure that we always get the same signature for the plugin or the same result of a contact on every platform. And the important part is here when we call success. So once again, using the initial cap plugin call to call success, or if we're unable to fetch them or don't have any access, we can call.reject instead. And that's also why we had it under results. Perhaps it would work a bit different, but I actually had a bit of problem figuring out how to return proper JSON on Swift and Android. So this is the code. Again, check out a link below the video, or stop the video, or Google your own logic. Now, if you have written your function within the plugin Swift, you also need to go to the plugin M, in which we can find already one register for the echo, and now also for our get contacts. So that makes sure that the get contacts plugin is properly connected to everything within iOS. Since we're using the contacts, we also need to think about permissions, and as we're in a Capacitor project, we can easily change our info plist and add a row. Yeah, I think that's wrong. Yeah, I want to be there. So we can search for privacy contact usage. I need your data, and there we go. This is something you could actually also do from what's this called? Visual Studio Code. So you could check out the info plist here and find the key and set it for yourself in there as well. But still, I think it's kind of good to get used to the native Xcode and Android Studio a bit at least. Now, since we've written the plugin in here, once again, I can check out my contacts plugin, and we see all the things we did are actually in here, which is kind of nice. So since this plugin will magically work on all platforms, we're now basically ready to launch this on our iPhone simulator to get a few contacts. Initially, I got some issues right here, some really strange errors that reminded me of my time as an iOS developer. In that case, make sure, if you're following this tutorial, that you don't just copy everything like contacts plugin, perhaps you named it whatever plugin, and then you got a wrong name in here, or you got a wrong name in here, and that can really mess up and you won't find the issue easily. So, make sure that you at least think a bit about this and check these class names. So that was the major issue in my case. That at least cost me like an hour or two. Okay, great day. Now, here we go. Here's my application. And when I press load contacts, quite immediately we see all the device contacts. And compared to the Cordova plugin to fetch contacts, I don't know why this is so fast and Cordova is so slow. So if you're looking for a solution, simply follow this. Within here, you can easily write some Swift code to filter based on the value passed to it. It could be a number, could be a name, or anything like this. And we see, well, here's the data, my contacts. Can we just close this and move this? This is to native or to JavaScript. That's actually from the plugin still. And here we go. My contact is the log within our Ionic application, and we see the nice data, nicely formatted and easy within our list. And this didn't really take us long to set up. This code was actually the most tricky part, or fixing this random error. And now we already got web and iOS, and we're just 50 minutes into this video, which is great because now we can also do the same. Yeah, I killed the simulator. We're fine, relax, we're doing fine. We can do the same for Android. So npx cap open Android. Once again, maybe even before we dive into everything, for Android, you usually need to take at least one additional step. The one additional step is to open your source main Java main activity within your Android project. We could also do this in Android Studio, but since you're usually integrating other plugins using your standard IDE, which might be Visual Studio Code, we can also do it from here. And that is importing your plugin within the main activity. So here we make use of the bundle identifier I picked in the beginning, plus the name of the actual plugin. And then you go within the init function and add context plugin.class. You will see this on a lot of community plugins for Capacitor. There's basically always the instruction to import them in the main activity and add this. This is really just one of the standard things for Capacitor Android plugins. Now, Capacitor, Android, too many technologies in here today. Android isn't too different from iOS in terms of the permissions. And because we're using the context, we need another block inside our Android manifest where we already see all the default capacitor settings. And as far as I know, we need read contexts. So that's it. Now we can dive into the development of our native Android plugin. So for this, I would actually recommend we go to Android Studio just to get a bit of native feeling, and also because the syntax highlighting in these tools is actually better right now for me than in Visual Studio Code. I might have to add something there. So this is now, as you can see, the didactic plugin was the Ionic application. I'm in the Android folder of our Ionic application that we added in the beginning. We can see my application. We can see the main activity in which we just did this little change. But we actually want to implement our plugin. So we can find our context plugin right here. We don't want to have any tests, but we want to work on our context plugin. So now things get interesting. As I said in the beginning, just like with Xcode, you can now apply any change in here, and you can check out the code of your context plugin by going to the Android source main Java context plugin, and you will see all the changes. So that is really the workflow. I recommend build your Capacitor plugin directly in your Ionic project so you can simply directly deploy it to your device. It will be a lot easier. Now, this is kind of a long text, and it actually took me a lot of time to figure this out. I will now bring this in and we will go through everything. Yeah, we got 104 lines within this listing. So what I did, can we actually increase the font size so you can somehow see this a bit better? File. Yeah, well, I haven't found the setting, but we can get through this. So zoom in a bit and we will do this. Maybe we can use the lens. That's for search. Okay, so you've seen the previous structure. It's now a bit different, but mostly still the same. What I've changed is, first of all, this is the initial entry function, get contacts, just like on iOS, just like on the web. Since we need permissions, it becomes a bit more tricky. So this is once again getting the filter that we don't really use anymore, but I just wanted to keep it to show you how it works. And then we call plugin request permission, and we want to get the read contacts. And you also need to pass a unique request code, so you can identify in the end, once you get the result back from the permission, that this is actually the result you were expecting. Or you could have different codes, so you could handle this in a different way then. So therefore, we override the handle request permission result, which is called after the permission to read the context is accepted. And within here we have an interesting concept because we will get a saved call. And that's why we call save call here. We're basically leaving our application at that point where we ask for permissions, and at some point we return back to the application. And therefore we need to save the plugin call variable that we got right here somehow in the background. And by calling save call, we're making sure it's saved. And by then calling get saved call, we can get the same value back. So we can now at this point still access our filter value and filter everything. If we don't have a saved call, you should return. And if the permission is not accepted, we can also return. But if the request code we get back here is the same like the one we initially passed, we're fine. We know that our permission dialog was accepted and we can actually perform our logic. Now, if you implement anything native that doesn't really require permission, you can skip all of this stuff. But I thought it might be a good idea to include a little bit more advanced example. Also, what we need to make sure that it works is having this request codes up here. So you could actually have multiple codes in here for different permission dialogues, and you could handle them once you come back here in the handle request permission and check for the other values. So that is really a nice system. Now, this is the actual load context function. I think it's terrible, and I think I didn't get something, but for some reason the name, the first name and last name weren't that easy to extract, and then the number was in a completely different place, but in the end, this finally worked. I somehow, I'm really bad. I should get a bit into Android development. I'm somehow getting the values. I put it into a little hash map. So for first name, last name, right now this is just the display name. I found a way to get one part, then the other part didn't work, and in the end I was just happy that it works somehow. The contact number can also be extracted somehow. That could also be an array, but I just wanted to use the first contact number and add it to the hash map. And finally, add the hash map to the list because that is just the information of one user. And of course, I want the information of all the contacts. In the end, I converted to a JSON array because just passing the hash map didn't really work. So this result was also on iOS a bit tricky, but this finally made it work. So we got the permission, we got the main activity, so I think we can deploy it to a device. Since I've connected my device, I can now run it. Actually, I will also put in a few breakpoints, like we did in the previous breakpoint video, debug video. And then let's try to debug this funny thing. That should somehow work. Please cast this to my iMac while it's building. Is it actually finished? Or do we encounter an error? Please let it still build. Ah, there we go. That is good news. That is good news. Okay, here's the application. See a lot of logs, and let's try to load contacts. We see the plugin request. We will go with allow because I don't want to do anything else. And now we see the request code we got is the same request code like the static variable we defined. So we're stepping into load contacts, which will perform all the funny things. Let's add another breakpoint here. And we already see a contact list of 3 results, Max, Mike, some random data. I really don't have any contacts on my Android phone. And let's close this. I just want to do this at the same time. Can I? No, I just, maybe, yeah, that should work. And there we go. All the contacts loaded. You might know that this is not Max or Mike's number, and this is not Ionic framework, so don't try to call them. But these are actually the contacts I have on my phone. I really don't know how can I do the contacts. I'm really so terrible. There are my contacts. I've added them, and now I can go back to the application and we see all of them. So That is how to develop a capacitor plugin. As you've seen, I highly recommend to set it up with the CLI, add a little web implementation, or at least as a fallback, and then integrate it into your Ionic application and add a function to trigger it, and then write the plugins within the native Xcode or Android Studio. It will make plugin development a lot easier. You will find all the tutorials, you will get the code highlighting of these native platforms, and you can basically write native code and immediately deploy it. So this workflow was really awesome. I've seen the workflow for Cordova in the past, and it wasn't as smooth as this. So that is really something I liked about Capacitor. This was just a small beginner intermediate tutorial. We've at least used a few permissions and import a few things, but there's a lot more. You could trigger native views, you could trigger intents, you can do a lot more with the data you pass to the plugin or pass back. So try to get into this. This is just an example. If you got any questions about it, feel free to ask. And if you want to see more about Capacitor in the future, or about Capacitor plugins, especially anything specific about it, please let me know. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and stay subscribed so you get notified about all the new tutorials, quick wins, and other app development and web development videos on this channel. If you want to learn more about Ionic with in-depth courses, a community of like-minded developers so you can learn and build your apps faster, you should definitely check out the Ionic Academy, which is my code school to help you with everything Ionic, with a huge library of courses, material, and a supportive Slack channel so we can get your app out. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you inside the next video. Have a great day and happy coding. Simon.